I've jotted down a few things I want us to talk about tonight about this short book. It's only 21 verses, shortest book in the Old Testament, and yet in these 21 verses there is an abundance of things for us to learn for today. Now, when you read the account in Obadiah, the Edomites had a fiendish delight in the calamity of the city of Jerusalem being destroyed and people being slaughtered. These people were so evil, they delighted in that taking place. It shows the callous indifference of a person who stands aloof in the hour of their brother's distress. These are brethren, and does not even try to help them in any sense. They are calloused, they are indifferent, they are hardened, they have no compassion, no sympathy for the death of so many of their own brethren. Now, if you look in Jeremiah, you might write this verse down, you can look it up tonight. Jeremiah 49, 7 through 16. In Jeremiah 49, 7 through 16, Jeremiah talks about the fate of Edom. And his language is very similar to the language of the book of Obadiah. Jeremiah 49, 7 through 16. Now Amos mentions the fate of Edom in Amos 9, verse 12. Most of these Old Testament prophets would talk about the heathen nations and their fate before God, to make the point to everyone that all people are accountable to God. Not just God's people, but everyone is accountable to God. Romans 14:12. We will all give an account of ourselves to God. So just because God had done so much for Israel, that doesn't mean that He is not going to judge the heathen. And this is so devastating, what happened in the book of Obadiah. This prophet wants to make it clear they're going to give an account for this. In fact, what's going to happen to Edom? It's going to be obliterated. This was so horrible in the sight of God, He is not going to let this pass. He is not going to overlook this. These people are going to be erased from the pages of history. Now, I wanted us to think about something that happened in Numbers 20, 14 through 21. In Numbers 20, God's people were wandering in the wilderness. And they come to the country of the Edomites. And they send a message to them. We want to pass through your country. We're not going to steal anything. We're not going to tear any crops down. We're going to be very careful. And if any of our cattle drink any of your water, we'll pay you for it. You know what the Edomites say? if you come through our country, you will be met with physical resistance. And they actually came and met the Israelites with an army and forbade them from just marching through their territory. So this struggle between Edom and the Israelites has been going on for hundreds of years. This is way back during the wilderness wanderings. Now, the Edomites came from what person in the Bible? Esau. And you remember Esau had a problem with his brother Jacob. They get that resolved in their lifetime, which that's a nice thing. When families get all torn up, before they all die, they ought to try to resolve it. I tried to resolve it with mine. That's something that's just common sense. So Jacob and Esau got their problems resolved, but their descendants never got it resolved. And so God is going to resolve it for them. And you say, well, why was it so bad in the days that we read about in Obadiah? That'd been hundreds of years ago. Why? You have to think about this. It was probably involved economics. Now, I've learned when you get involved in people's money and their way of making a living, you're getting on touchy ground. And this was likely an economic problem because Edom was on the trade route that was the best one in the world, in that part of the world at that time. And they hated the Israelites and wouldn't let them have any part of it. So you get not just old feuds, but you get present day economics involved, and people can really get mad at each other. I've seen families torn apart over money and economics. And that's what is likely involved with these people here in the book of Obadiah. In a moving manner, the author presents the downfall of Edom. Look at verse 3 and 4. Obadiah 3 and 4. The pride of thine heart has deceived thee. Pride is deceptive. It makes us think we're something we're not. Galatians 6:3. If a man thinks himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. So the Edomites are told the pride of your heart has deceived you. But look at verse 4. They thought because they were in these high mountains and they thought that their country was, nobody could defeat them. And they actually said, who will bring me down? In arrogance. And the Lord said in verse 4, I will bring you down, says the Lord. So their pride was the foundation of all of their sins. They had many sins that God is going to hold them accountable for, and it all goes back to the beginning of their pride. 1 John 2:15. Christians are told, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. Well, what's that talking about? For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is of the world and is not of the Father. So God warns us over and over about how pride can deceive us. Proverbs 16:18, pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. In 1 Corinthians 10:12, let him that thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. Pride can pull us to depths we never imagined. Once you let it get a hold of you and you think it's okay, that's when it'll get you. Now, the Israelites thought, because they were God's people, this became a matter of pride to them. And they thought because they were God's people, nothing would ever happen to them, even if they were unfaithful. When all these prophets told them of their doom, they didn't believe it. You say, well, why didn't they repent? Because they didn't believe it. They did. All these years, God had protected them. And they did not believe that God would allow their enemies to come in and carry them off as captives. But He did. Pride deceives the Israelites as well as the Edomites. What were the sins of Edom? We do not want to be guilty of what these people were guilty of because of the horrible results of what happened to them. Okay, what was their sins? They displayed a lack of brotherliness toward Israel when she was in distress and as she was being routed by her enemies. They showed no brotherly compassion, no kindness. They were totally indifferent to that. They did not care. Edom gloated over this. And if you look at verse number 13, they even helped the enemies against their own brethren. When every time you have wars like this, of course, you have hordes of refugees, just like we see in the Middle East today. And it's sad, all the refugees that are slaughtered. And here you have refugees fleeing from Jerusalem, and the Edomites stop them from fleeing. That's pretty hard. That's pretty cold, pretty indifferent, non-compassionate, non-loving. They didn't care. They stopped the refugees from getting out of Jerusalem, where they could be there and more of them be slaughtered. That's the kind of people we're dealing with when we look at the book of Obadiah. Now, as Edom has done to Israel, God tells in the book of Obadiah, so it shall be done to you. We all know Galatians 6:7, whatever a man sows, that will also reap. He that sows to his flesh shall of his flesh reap corruption. He that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap everlasting life. The seeds we plant while we're on this earth, our attitudes, our actions, our conducts, we're planting seeds all over the place. And one of these days, we're going to reap what we have sown on this earth. And it'll be a day when excuses don't count, because God knows everything. He knows everything about you. He knows everything about me. He knows me better than I know myself. So these flea-bitten excuses we use today, we won't use them when Judgment Day comes. We'll know how feeble and ridiculous they are. God won't hear them for a moment. So we must understand we're all going to stand before God, and we're all going to give an account. What do we learn from Obadiah? Romans 15:4 talks of the Old Testament and says, whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. What do we learn from Obadiah? I just jotted down a few things we can learn from what happened in this book. It is a rebuke to people who refused to be involved in anyone else's problems. There are people who just will not do it for any reason. They will not get involved. I don't care if it's a brother. I don't care who it is. They are not going to get involved. This book is a rebuke to such ignorance. Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So here is a rebuke, this book of Obadiah, to those who will not obey that command. Some just simply, problems can get ugly. They can get messy, especially other people's. And so people they won't get involved with it. And they won't. They're just indifferent to it. You ask them to them, oh, no. Nothing I can do. Nothing I can do. No. Not me. Get somebody else. Somebody else can do that. This is a rebuke to such nonsense. This is a rebuke to those who will not get involved. Galatians 6:1 says, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. It does matter how you do it. If you go to help someone with the attitude, I'm so much better than you, and you should have had better sense than to get involved in this problem, and I'm here to help you out because you're so ignorant. In the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Galatians 6:2. Now someone says this, that person does not deserve my help. Now think about that for a minute. Isn't that a good one? That person doesn't deserve my help. That's what the Edomites thought. They didn't think their brethren being killed, they didn't think they deserved the help of Edom. You think about this. They don't deserve it. I agree with you. They don't deserve it. They brought it on themselves. I agree. Most of what we go through, we do bring on ourselves. No doubt about it. But if you start saying they're not worthy, you think about this. Which one of us are worthy to receive God's grace? Which one of us? Romans 3, 9 and 10 still says, there is none that is righteous, not even one. Of course they're not worthy. Nobody's worthy of God's grace. Nobody deserves to be in heaven. Nobody can say when this life is over, that's where I deserve to be. If you want to get technical, what we all deserve is God's punishment. Every one of us. That's what we deserve. But because of His grace and His favor that we don't deserve, we can escape that punishment. So it's not that a person is not worthy of your help. None of us are worthy. So that excuse is more ignorance. The idea that a nation cannot be destroyed, the idea that they have such defenses that no one can ever do anything to them. Who would have thought that a little island over there in the Pacific, who would have thought those Japanese people would have done what they did to Pearl Harbor? Who would have thought they had the sense enough? We didn't. Who would have thought they were brave enough to do it? We didn't think so. And so thousands of people died because we were not ready. Our excuse was, well, we're not even at war. We didn't think they would do it. They did it. Thousands died, and then later thousands more died. We didn't think so. The idea that a nation is so strong that nobody can do anything to them, that's false. That's what Edom thought. They were wrong. The delusion of pride in verse 3. The delusion of pride. Romans 12:3. We ought not to think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. We ought to think a little more seriously and a little more soberly about it. We all stand at the foot of the cross as sinful people, every one of us. And we stand there hoping and begging for the grace and mercy of God, because none of us deserve what He's done for us. And our little pride can send us straight to hell. These people's pride got them wiped out of the history books. They're gone. There are no Edomites today. None. Are there any descendants of Jacob? Yeah. God says, Jacob, they're going to survive. Edom is not. There are no Edomites. There's even a few of the Samaritans left. But there's no Edomites. Their pride deceived them. What do we learn? The sin of taking advantage of others' misfortunes. Some people actually take advantage of people. when they're in distress. You know, I learned this with Dalton. That's why I have to be his legal guardian. He can't sign anything. It's not worth a thing unless I sign it too, because I know there's people out there that if they come up to him and say, I'm hungry, will you write me a check for $1,000? He'll write it right there. They'll take advantage of him. They'll take advantage of him because he doesn't know any better and he's got a good heart. These people took advantage of the Israelites in their darkest hour. How low can human beings go? Pretty low. We can talk so ugly about each other and then say, I'm a New Testament Christian. We can be so cruel to one another and then think we're okay with God. Edom thought they got away with something. They got away with nothing. And neither will we. There are 3 minor prophets that talk about the foreign nations: Obadiah, Nahum, and Habakkuk. Why? Why do they talk about these foreign nations? They want us to understand all nations on the earth are accountable to God. And so they bring up the sins of each one of these nations. The complete absence of compassion and human kindness is and was inexcusable. When people have no compassion, no kindness for another human being, I don't care what they've done to you, what they've said to you, you have no compassion toward that person. That is inexcusable before God. Now maybe we can overlook it. Do what you want. God will not. Have you thought of this verse? Look at 1 John chapter 3. Oh, I believe the Bible. Well, let's see. Whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother have need and shuts up his bowels of compassion from him, how does the love of God dwell in him? Now, in ancient days, sounds weird to us, sounds weird to me, but they thought of compassion as coming from the inside of a person, and so they would often talk about bowels of compassion because it comes from inside of us. You see a brother in distress, a brother or sister in distress, whether they deserve it or not, and you can be of help to that person, and you refuse to do it. What's it say? How does the love of God live in such a person? And what's the answer? That's a rhetorical question. He's not asking a question so they can sit down and figure it out. The answer is obvious. If you see your brother or sister in distress or in need and you do nothing, the love of God is not in you. You can come to every assembly. Never miss an assembly. You can come to every one of them. But if you are in this condition and you do nothing, He says the love of God's not in you. If the love of God's not in us, what's left? So, the complete absence of compassion and human kindness from any person, Christian or non-Christian, is inexcusable. You remember when the man asked Jesus, what's the great commandment in the law? He said, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. The second is likened to it. You should love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. In the parallel, Mark says that the man commended Jesus for that answer. That's mighty nice of him, wasn't it? He says, you're right. That's worth more than all the sacrifices. And Jesus looked at that man and says, you're not far from the kingdom. You say, well, Matthew 22:37, that's talking about the Old Testament. Get real. Jesus told the man, thinking that way, you're not far from God's kingdom. That's what God's kingdom is based on. Number one, love for God. Number two, love for our fellow man. That's what the kingdom of God is all about. That's what we're supposed to be teaching. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And this non-compassion, indifferent, that is the total opposite of what these scriptures teach. Now, what about Odom? They had an unwarranted elevation of self. Look at the book of Obadiah and answer this question. Who did the Edomites care about? They didn't care about their brother. Who did they care about? Exactly. That's who they cared about. Themselves. That was who mattered. What they could get out of Israel, that's all they cared about Israel. And some people like other people only for what they can get out of them. That's what the Edomites were like. Maybe some of the descendants did live till today. We certainly see people with that attitude. All they care about is themselves and their family, and everyone else, I don't have time for you. I got too much to do. Don't mess with, don't bother me. Don't call me, don't text me. I don't have time. Neither did the Edomites. They didn't care. So this kind of attitude is inexcusable. Virtue in compassion and the willingness to identify with and the desire to help another person in distress, whether they deserve it or not. And isn't that the way Jesus is described? Well, aren't we supposed to be like Him? Aren't we supposed to live like Him and think like Him? And you see His compassion expressed to people that you would think, you think you're busy? Jesus was the busiest person who ever lived, and He always had time for the individual. The woman at the well, the widow at Nain, the lepers, the blind. You know, what if Jesus just said, well, I don't have time for that. I've got a world to save. You'll get by. You've been blind all your life. You'll make it. That's not my problem. I've got my own business to take care of. Get out of my way as I go through this town. That's not the way Jesus acted. He would stop and talk to them. And even his disciples couldn't believe some of the people he talked to. They would actually say, Lord, you're giving your time to this sorry individual. Even the prostitutes, he would show them that he cared and that he wanted to help them and he wanted to give them a better life. You know, he could have said to all those prostitutes, why, you're just trash. I don't have time for you. You don't deserve any better than what you've got. You made your bed, now sleep in it. That's not how Jesus acted. That's not how anyone acts that has the love of God. Every person is valuable in the sight of God. Matthew 16:26. How much is one soul worth? Just one. The whole world. What if they're a prostitute? What if they're on drugs? What if they're an alcoholic? What if they're just an idiot? That one soul is worth more than everything in this world. We don't always act like that. What is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? One soul is worth the whole world. Jesus acted that way. He lived that way. And that's the way we must live. Here's a few things I picked up. Human defenses are useless against God. I hope the United States stands forever. I can't imagine this world without it. I've been to other countries, and I tell you what, it's something else. The way other people live, the way we live, and in our affluence, and the way other countries live, it's unbelievable. I can't imagine the world without the goodness of the United States. But we have to remember that if God decides a nation's going to fall, that's it. Ridicule shows human pride and lack of brotherly love. It is sinful to rejoice in the calamity of another person. Another person has a calamity and we are inwardly happy about it. Pride and envy silences the voice of compassion. Pride and envy takes away your compassion for other people. All you have left is what you think of yourself. Of course, next week we will not meet because of our gospel meeting. So I want you to begin reading for me the book of Jonah. It's a short book too, not quite as short as Obadiah, but you